What's going on? My name is Joshua Rzepka, and this is the first video in a 15 video series where I speak with 17 world-class trumpeters. In each one of these videos, I will present one question, and then you will hear that question answered by all 17 trumpeters in sequence. I'll be posting a new video to this series every 1 to 2 weeks. It really just depends on the editing. This first video took me a little more than 40 hours to edit. However, once you watch it, I think you'll agree that the effort was well worth it. This video gives a completely unique insight into the way different trumpeters think, practice, and approach music and life. Having seen all of these interviews, I can honestly say you're not going to want to miss any of them. So make sure that you hit that subscribe button and hit the bell so that you're notified when the next video is posted. Hopefully this video inspires you and helps you realize that we're not all so different. Most of us practice from the exact same books. But there's something else. It's not just what you practice, it's how, it's the intention. And that's why the first question I asked all of my guests was, what does a typical practice day look like, and does that differ from an ideal practice day? Now, this is a long video, so relax and get into a comfy spot. Also, I've broken this video down into chapters, so you can easily jump to any answer, so hopefully that'll make it easier for all of you to use and reference in the future. With all that being said, I will catch you at the end.
I mean, obviously a lot depends on the context of the practice day. Is it a day where I have rehearsals? Is it a day where I have concerts? What kind of repertoire is on those rehearsals and concerts? Am I doing a lot of teaching that day? Or is it just a free day? And, you know, a lot of it depends on the context, again, of what's happened before it and what's happening after it. The first thing I'm going to go with is just a free day. Okay. And a free day, my warm-up would be a 45-minute session, either a 45-minute stamp routine that Mr. Stamp took me through when I studied with him, very much akin to that, or a routine that I've set up myself that I've codified in my Daily Fundamentals book, which is basically Schlossberg, Clark-oriented type of stuff. Sometimes I'll supplement those 45 minutes with maybe another 20 to 30 minutes of either Arbonne or Violin, or Gecker, articulation studies, endurance drills, those kind of things. And then a lot of times the next step from there will be to play some lyrical etudes. Usually my go-tos are the Rochu-Bordoni etudes. What I'll do is I'll play maybe 4 or 5 of those with 1 minute in between. Varying dynamics. Most of it's going to be in the softer dynamic throughout most of my warm-up routine and my fundamentals routine. But once in a while with the etudes, maybe I'll take 8 bars and all of a sudden play fortissimo. But it's still, I'm playing it in a lyrical manner, so I'm cultivating my sound the right way, making sure my air and air support of the sound is all happening correctly. So, you know, with that kind of as a basis, I'll venture into some different dynamics, and maybe, especially if I've got like a Mahler symphony or Bruckner symphony or Strauss tone poem or Prokofiev symphony, Shostakovich, those kind of works where I've got to turn on a dime and play very strong and then very softly. I'll do that within the context of these etudes. So I'll do like 8 bars really loud, 8 bars really soft. 8 bars mezzo forte, 8 bars really soft, 8 bars really loud, just here and there, just to get into that realm and get my air and my control of my air and my sound properly in place. And then throughout this stuff, whether it's, you know, the Arbonne, Clark, Schlossberg, Violin, Gecker, you know, articulation studies or endurance drills, irons, any of those kind of books, I'm really trying to go through a wide variety of all the different fundamental aspects that I'm going to be dealing with. Everything from long tones, low intervals, mid-range intervals, lip slurs, articulation scales, arpeggios, chromatics, you know, really working on that evenness throughout the range, really going from the lowest point to the highest point and everything in between, and getting my facility very even and very easy throughout the range. So my sound is very even, everything's reacting very even, I'm rhythmically very even with everything. You know, I've got a tuner nearby that, you know, every now and then I'm checking in with that to make sure that what I think I'm doing is actually what I'm doing. I have a metronome. It's not on all the time, but once in a while, especially with Clark studies and some exercises where I want to be more exacting, I'm going to pop on the metronome to make sure I'm rhythmically accurate as well. So my inner time and what's actually outwardly happening is in sync with one another. One thing I realized is that any session that I do, I found that anything approaching or exceeding 2 hours is diminishing returns. So I never ever do any session that's more than an hour and a half, hour and 45 at a time. I always want to make sure I'm focused and it's, productive and it's efficient and everything is, working properly and assimilating and aligning things properly and ingraining things properly and thoroughly. So after one session of an hour and a half, hour and 45, maybe I'll do a section session about the same length. And there I'll do some of the same kind of rudimentary stuff, maybe for a shorter amount of time. Maybe I'll do some Chikowitz for maybe 15, 20 minutes, something along those lines. And then I'll get into some repertoire, different repertoire that I'm working on. With the orchestra, I'm always trying to work at least 2 weeks ahead. If I've got maybe a solo performance coming up, maybe I'll start diving into that. It all depends, again, what the context is. Also, whether I do one session or two sessions depends. Am I in the middle of a run of, I've got a Bruckner symphony, and then a Mahler symphony, then a Shostakovich symphony, then, a Strauss Heldenleben or Alpine symphony. If I've got some heavy lifting going on, which has happened. I mean, there was one run I remember where it was, we went on, let's see, we had 3 weeks here where it was Zarathustra with a Messiaen piece that I had to play piccolo trumpet on, Mahler 2, Alpine Symphony with a Messiaen piece that I had to play piccolo trumpet on. And then after those 3 weeks, taking that on the road for 3 weeks. So, if I'm in the middle of that, I'm not going to sit here and park myself in front of the horn for 5 hours in a day. I mean, that's, going to be not the best idea and, turn myself into a hamburger and diminishing returns. So that I maybe do just the hour and a half of the fundamentals, get myself real aligned, dial myself in, get myself feeling great, put it away. Sometimes I do that anyways. Other days, maybe I'll add a second session that's more repertoire oriented. So that's kind of, a little bit of what I would do if I'm on my own without some big stuff going on, or maybe in the context of some more heavy lifting.
Well, right now, not a lot of days are actually typical. I have a young child here, and I've got to tell you, it's a whole nother level of improvising, just trying to keep up with his schedule. So right now, my typical day of practicing is get it in wherever you can. If it's 5 minutes here or there, 10 minutes there. If I'm doing isometric exercises, meaning, I don't have the horn in my hands, I'm doing a lot more whistling, free buzzing, different things like that, just to keep the muscles going. So my ideal practice day would just be to have maybe even 2 or 3 hours would be amazing. I normally start with my maintenance routine, just getting into all my embouchure, dexterity, tonguing exercises, all that beautiful technical stuff that we brass players have to do. And I would play some classical etudes. I would play through some jazz transcriptions. I would play through some patterns. Man, I can't imagine having a few uninterrupted hours right now, but I would just try to do everything as much as possible.
It really depends on what I have coming up. And nowadays, of course, for most, I've heard some trumpeters are like getting really hardcore in shedding, and others are just like trying to figure out what to do. But I'll say, yeah, my ideal, I think, as scientific as an approach as possible is always the best. So we all could relate to those times where you feel like things are going great, and then suddenly things feel like they're really horrible. And so there's these mysteries are solvable, and if you believe that, then you may as well create a system and use it that kind of uncovers what those mysteries might be. And so something like, and actually the original idea of this, I actually saw Caleb Hudson doing something like this when he first joined Canadian Brass. And it was so different from like the complete mayhem that I had been doing my whole life. And I really adopted it and thought deeply about why this is so important. And I see that there's other fields that do this. Actually, my favorite comparison is in investing. This guy, David Swenson, he's famous for having built the Yale endowment from like a measly, I don't know, whatever the number was, to like he's one of the most famous investors who have ever lived, getting something like an 18% return every year for like 20 years. I mean, it's a legendary endowment. And he did something similar to the way I like to practice, which is you sort of think of like a pie chart of all the different aspects of playing that you want to hit daily, so that maybe you have a routine that you're going to kind of shorten because you have a huge concert that day. It's nice if you could still hit every aspect of playing, even if it's just going to be within 5 minutes. And then on the other hand, at the end of a week, you could sort of look back and see what areas you've improved in and what areas sort of were stagnant or didn't improve at all or got worse. And then just adjust. You can either adjust the material or the amount of time you're allocating to each thing. So if you feel like your flexibility really did great that week, but your sound didn't really change for the better, you can make up the long tones, for example, without even changing the material. So then it's like screwing a screw in like quarter turn at a time. If you got it right, you just back it off a little bit. You're really dialing it in just right, and it evolves as you change. So it's sort of a beautiful thing. But my natural tendency, which is the more honest answer, is like I've never warmed up, and like I've always just like picked up my horn and just played whatever I had to do. And depending on what I have to do, that's fine. But with Canadian brass is when I really developed like a rigid routine like that, because it had to be great, and the book was very diverse and very hard. And if we changed things last minute or had no sleep, I wanted to feel solid. So that's what I would recommend to anybody out there that's questioning what they should do, but it's not necessarily what I always do.
Well, a typical day of practice definitely involves working on material that I have coming up for performances or guest artists or clinic presentations. Or it involves working on music that I have for music projects of my own groups, bands, etc. But always the typical day involves a solid warm-up routine and a lot of flexibility. I really work on sound production, and it usually takes about 90 minutes to 2 hours when I'm having a typical day. An ideal day is 2 hours. Typical day is about an hour and a half, 90 minutes. And that's based on whatever, and that can fluctuate a little bit based on whatever I have during the day performance-wise, or whether I'm traveling, of course. I'm blessed to have lots of things that I have to work on. So there's always something to practice. I'm never at a loss for something to practice. And it's really making sure that I'm incorporating all facets of my playing in my practice time.
Typical day of practice now, since I've been home so much. So actually for the past 6 or 7 years, my warm-up routine is, I do that Michael Davis 20-minute warm-up routine with like extensions here and there, just to sort of push it a little bit further than what he's written. And now that I've been doing it consistently for so many years, is like optimal for like the challenges I give myself on a daily basis, like trying to engage my chops to get them vibrating, to doing intervallic study, mostly tone development, and then some range and articulation. Yeah, so I liked it at first because it came with a CD of Phil Smith, playing, and anything with Phil Smith playing, you want to do, right? And it's just so amazing. And like the accompaniment track to it was just like, at first it's like, wow, that's intense. But then you realize that's kind of great that it's so intense, because you really start thinking about your air moving and energy in sound. So I started doing that. And then after, a couple of years, it was like, I need this. I need to have something that's the same, consistent, and something that I can do quickly, relatively quickly, before a concert or before performance. 20 minutes is the ideal amount of time. And so I've been sticking with that, and I'm really enjoying it.
Well, that's a good question. And I must say there was a kind of a pre-COVID routine that I lived by. I hate to use the word routine, but my day was a lot different because I was always half the time on the road. So it was easier to maintain my focus because I always had some kind of music I had to learn for the next gig, or I had a predetermined set of time where I had to keep my chops up, and I knew what was happening. Now there's just pretty much, other than some home recording, a blank slate, but I try to maintain my practicing as much as I can. The challenge really is that word, maintaining focus on what you're practicing. So on a good day, I get the more clinical, fundamental stuff out of the way first, which has to do with what's known usually as the Adam routine, maybe some Carmine mixed in, depending how my chops are feeling. I still use those basic books that Adam proposed. But there's also a good book that I always mention that's called a tribute to William Adam by one of his students, Charlie Davis, that has all the Clark exercises and the exercises from the other book, kind of some altered a little in one book, and Adam's philosophies and photos and a lot of just inspirational things we can talk about later maybe. Also practicing Charlier, just classical things to keep my sound happening. I usually choose an etude or two, or even a jazz etude, so-called jazz etude. I'm not a great classical player. I never learned the repertoire, really. I was always, in my head anyway, a jazz player. So I concentrated more on that. But as far as having a sound, I did concentrate on what was really kind of a classical sound meshed with jazz sensibility. One of my teachers would always laugh when I play the characteristic studies with a doodle tongue. Yeah, that came naturally from playing with records. So I get that stuff usually late afternoon. But the main part of my practicing still is, because as a jazz player, I have to maintain fingers endurance, and it's really what I do. So I spend a lot of the day trying to find things that might be fun that I don't have to play along with. As strange as that sounds, I might find a video, I'll stick it to somebody great, Sonny Rollins back in the old days playing with trio, where he jumps from one thing to another. It's real spontaneous. So I'll get that in iTunes and I'll say, man, that's going to be what I'll play with tonight. So I spend a lot of time, believe it or not, in these weeks off, maintaining new things to play along with. And I spend a good 2 hours a night, sometimes longer, but sensibly just playing along, usually with headphones. Not a great thing. I also practice without headphones, but I like doing the play along things with headphones on with the perfect amount of reverb. Finally, after all those years in the recording studios, I can control the reverb. My wife set all this up, God bless her. So I can really enjoy myself playing, and I do it sensibly, to learn repertoire, to try to utilize my ears. If it's a tune I don't know, I'll try to figure out as much as I can without looking at the chord changes. And I'll do that pretty assiduously every night. It's the last thing I do before I go to bed. It usually starts after my wife and kid go to sleep. And then I'm down here playing for 2 to 3 hours off and on. I rest a lot as soon as I get the least bit tired. And I would, back in the day when I was working, I would slowly build it up day by day. So by the time the gig came along, I was ready to play a 2-hour gig in front of a big band or whatever I had to do, a quintet gig, sextet gig, Mike Stern quartet where there's a million notes, loud, you're never sure what was coming up. Last year, Billy Cobham. So I guess that's it in a nutshell. Finding things to play along with. That's the name of the game for me these days.
A typical practice day no longer exists for me. Mostly because all the tours that I had up until this point stopped, and a lot of the music I was meeting daily to internalize isn't going to be played for a while. So I immediately switched to playing out my window to the neighbors and playing at the 7 o'clock rally for the troops and the frontline workers. And that, I just like to rewind how I went from my ideal practice routine to where I'm at now. That made me realize that less is more, especially in the case of the way we can beat ourselves up a lot as trumpet players. Like, oh my God, I didn't warm up. I didn't practice. I can't play. So I really ended up getting myself in a more of a minimalized situation of maintenance. And so the ideal practice day, I don't even remember it. I can't even tell you what that is. It definitely was encompassing the music I was working on, though, to be touring with. And now it's more about day-to-day memorization of how the trumpet feels so that my brain doesn't completely lose it.
I've always been pretty methodical, maybe almost too methodical about my practicing, and being really wanting to be consistent about my practice routine, and not just warm up, but being consistent about what I want to develop. I try to make a typical day as close to an ideal day as possible. If I'm teaching early, or back in the misty past of going out and on the road and playing, getting up and going to the airport or something like that. A lot of times it's starting early in the day. I've always liked to practice early in the day. And that's something I think since I was pretty young. I feel like the body is a little bit fresher. Well, it is fresher in the morning. These days I've been doing a 3-day rotation for my maintenance. That rotation is built around every 3 days doing more buzzing. I've been doing mouthpiece buzzing pretty religiously for about 15 years now. Maybe more than 15 years, actually, ever since a friend of mine turned me on to the James Thompson buzzing book. After doing that very religiously for many years, I decided fairly recently to put it into a rotation, and every third day do my buzzing routine warm up first, and then the other 2 days maybe buzzing a few tones, but de-emphasizing it a bit. And I kind of seem to think this works really well. The first part of my day, no matter whether I'm buzzing or not, is really about getting everything in order. So the buzzing routine, or if I'm not doing that, I like to play for a few minutes just a little bit freely, just to see how things are working. Maybe some chromatic scales, or maybe just seeing how a few little licks are connecting together or something like that. Emission studies I do often at the beginning of my day, something, sort of like the poo attacks, that sort of thing. I have these flow studies that I've put together myself. More and more, I'm trying to use my own autonomous materials, and a lot of the materials that I've developed for teaching my students for myself. For instance, I'll do flow studies, but the flow studies, instead of being based on the scalar or triadic concept of, say, like a Chikowitz flow study, they're oriented towards the pentatonic pairs that that might be a little bit more appropriate for something I might play on a dominant chord or something like that. And I find these work pretty well. I'm very, very open to ruthlessly employing anything that comes along. So I've been putting a lot of breath attacks, something that I've always done in my practicing, but also bends and reverse bends into these flow studies too. I enjoyed very much recently being exposed to Daniel Rosenboom's trumpet method, and the way that he employs breath attacks and this bend reverse bend thing. Something that also another friend of mine and ex-student of mine, Brian Davis, has been using in his own practice, and I think on some of his YouTube videos. I've been adapting exercises by, say, Schlossberg or Bylin, or different types of exercises to playing in multiple positions during one exercise. So in other words, grafting the idea of triad pairs onto flexibility studies. So again, it's like trying to get two for the price of one, working on the chops and getting sounds into my head that I might want to explore a little bit later in my day, or when I'm playing a solo. The things that I've always wanted to get out of practicing is consistency, flexibility, range to a certain extent, sound always. I think for many years I emphasized flexibility not at the expense of articulation, but in the sense of like that flexibility came first. I'm trying to put articulation a little bit farther up front in my practice day and to integrate it into my maintenance routine, not like do all the slurs first and then do the tonguing. It's, going back and forth between slurs and tonguing, perhaps in the same exercise. I feel like playing a slurred exercise where you fill in the slurred notes with articulation, or the other way around, taking an articulation exercise and filling in, especially if it's a repeated note articulation exercise, filling that in with longer length slurred things. I'll do that. I'll do that, for instance, with something like the Anthony Plogue articulation exercises. I'll fill in those repeated notes and make it, and then it becomes a basic slow flexibility exercise. A lot of people will like rock the Arban slurs, but they won't be able to hold a note well, and that's because they haven't done the Schlossberg slurs and gotten into like the long, what I think some people might call long tone slurs. And I think this also has helped in terms of the strength. And, I think strength is a lot about just making sure that your corners are working well.
My typical practice day, let's say my perfect scenario day that I would love to have every time I practice, it would consist of 3 sessions. One session where I would address fundamentals, a second session where I would address technical aspects of the instrument, like etudes and things like that, and difficult passages, music that I'm working on. And then a third session where I would just play and enjoy, But if there is a session that I cannot live without, is the first session, the session for fundamentals. And then when I'm on the road, it's just, whatever you're dealt with, it's just that's what it is. And then my priority is always fundamentals, because I know that they're gonna get me out of the sticky situations.
Oh my goodness, I don't know. It's a good example because to share this with, especially with younger people, because it has been a different eras in my life. Now I'm 71. I don't practice 8 hours a day like I used to. And what I try to do most of the time is do a little warm up. Yeah, that's I still doing. But when I was on the road, most of the time, I only warm up. I didn't have time to practice. I was traveling and sound check and this and that and playing a hotel and that. But of course, I know that the trumpet is merci less. The trumpet don't give you a break. If you don't practice, the trumpet gonna send you a bill, and you're gonna have to pay for it. But my recommendation, of course, is try to practice every day. But no matter what, I still involved with music because music saved my life. I say that a couple of million times in my life, and I'm never gonna get tired of repeat that. Music saved my life, and especially now in the last 10. Almost 11 months sitting here on my butt at home, I've been composing, recording, doing a lot of things. I done already almost 400 videos in these months. 400 videos of probably a couple of 100 new composition and another standard on things that I never have an opportunity to play it or record it. And I took this opportunity and used that time in the best way possible, you know. But practicing it is absolutely mandatory. It's necessary, you know. Otherwise, you know, the trumpet don't give you a break, man. No. Nowadays, I spend more time with the piano when I'm composing, you know, or recording or something. A piano is for me is the best music teacher, you know, because the piano help you to understand the music in general much better. You get a little deeper in music when you're familiar with the piano. And if you want to compose or arrange or orchestrate or something, man, that's the best tool to use.
A typical day when I'm practicing for me is that I get up and then I warm up, because my embouchure feels better when I warm up in the morning, and for example, not only in the afternoon or in the evening when I have to play concert. So in order to get the good feeling, I try to start in the morning, and then in the afternoon or in the evening, I like to do the more serious work, because then I can focus more, because in the morning I'm often very tired. And for playing concerts, it's important to be focused in the evening and not be tired in the evening. So yeah, that's kind of my ideal practice day. And my completely ideal day is to have time for my horses in between. So yeah, practicing and having time to spend with my horses.
I've set up my life so that I'm surrounded by a lot of horns. I'm here in my practice area. I have stacks and stacks of music and LPs and CDs. And I leave my horns out. I have one that's packed up for when I go off and do gigs, and I have a number of other horns. And I make sure that I play every day. Depending on what I need to work on, sometimes I view it as practice, and sometimes I view it as just playing. And there's always some music playing in the house, and there's always a TV on. And sometimes I'll pick up my horn and just play along to a TV commercial if I hear something that's interesting to me, or something that I think I might be able to incorporate somehow. And I like to play along the records. And then there's other days where I'll break out the top tones for the trumpeter book, and maybe for a couple of weeks I'll get into this zone where I just work those first three, you know, characteristic studies, and really try to perfect them, you know, starting slow and then speeding up. And then I'll get into a groove where maybe for a few days I'll just work on the triple tonguing section out of the Handbook, or the double tonguing section out of the Handbook. And then maybe the next week I'll do that Ernest S. Williams, The Secret of Technique Preservation, cover to cover, and I'll do that every day. And those little increments of playing time, each one of those will take up maybe an hour or so, but I'll get up in the morning and I'll get my body, you know, woken up a little bit. Like, I forget, it was some great violinist or somebody who said, every day you need to find your technique anew. And especially with brass players, it's not like we can just go up to a piano and go, beep, you know, and there's your sound. It's like we have to find our sound every day. So I start by, you know, stretching, just waking my body up, you know, getting these intercostal muscles in between the ribs and the lower abdominals moving, and I'll massage my face. And we're talking about, I get up around 6 or 7 in the morning and I start this, you know. My family doesn't mind, they're used to hearing the trumpet. They sleep right through it, which is great. And I'll go like that. I'll flap, get the blood in there, start thinking about what I'm doing, start focusing, kind of get into a tunnel vision mode about I'm going to play now, you know. Take some deep breaths. I'll do that. And I get my students to do this too. It only takes a few minutes. And then get the mouthpiece up there. I'll do some triads and like that. And then I'll blow some warm air through the horn, bring it up to body temperature. And so I've got the body going, and I played some simple things on the trumpet, like the partial exercise with all the 7 fingerings, the etude from, you know, Clark. And then I'll go have some juice and some breakfast or something, maybe go off and do something else. But see, the thing is that my horns are out, especially now, since we're all at home, we're all locked in at home now. And then whatever I feel like doing, I got a nice stereo system I'll put on Abersol. And, you know, I have a stand there, and I'll try to negotiate my way through some changes on a couple of tunes. I'll spend a week or two learning just one tune. And so it's still fun for me to play amidst all the technical drills and characteristic studies and things. And then, so I'll do that for maybe 40 minutes or so. There's certain things I want to do every day. I make sure I always play probably the first 8 pages of the Schlossberg book, and I do it with a tuner. And I just make sure that that pitch is right in there, you know, Schlossberg slow, medium volume. I make sure I do that every day. I make sure I go through maybe the first 4 or 5 studies out of the Clark book every day, pretty much back to back. And then I make sure that I work on single tonguing, double tonguing, and triple tonguing. And those things are the things that I make sure I do every day. And then after I get that done, after, you know, the warm up and everything, then I'm free to explore learning new tunes, or just, you know, getting out a cornet and trying to, you know, play some traditional style stuff, or, you know, or I get out my C trumpet and try to play some excerpts, you know, because I have an orchestral excerpt book. So I'm in a situation right now, because we have so much time, that I've actually, my playing has improved during this last year because of all the home practice. You know, I mean, I really miss going out and doing gigs and seeing everybody, because there's things to learn on gigs too, different types of things. And because this is what I do, I'm a trumpet player. I mean, you know, I started playing trumpet in 1965. I've built my whole life. Everything I have here with our home and everything is from playing the trumpet. So it's just like, there's no way I can get away from doing it, you know. And so a typical practice day, that's about as typical as it gets for me. Though I think the main thing that you could categorize as typical with me is, yeah, I play every day.
Regardless of ideal or not, I always like to try to get some long tones in. Tone, and like my tone is really important to me, and like maintaining that. I came from the school of thought that no matter what notes or rhythms or pieces that you're playing, the first thing that people are going to hear is your tone. So always get in long tones. Lip slurs, I usually get to hit every day. A book I like working out of, or for their long tones, is Schlossberg. Has some really nice lip drills in there that I feel like I still haven't gotten through all of them yet. So it keeps it new and doesn't get boring. And then as far as trumpet goes, there's a couple of like etude books that I kind of rotate around. Usually like Top Tones, or Kaprosh 60 Studies, if I'm pronouncing his name right. And something I just recently got onto that a student of mine kind of put me onto was Berdoni. There's some really nice musical melodic melodies, and I'm all for like melodic melodies. So I've been really enjoying like sight reading through those for the past week or so. I think I'm on number 6 now. Last time I was on the road, just from the nature of the show I was performing and like how intensive it was, I usually found that I needed to like on my off days, like chill out, not play anything. So I didn't really do as much etudes as I think I'm doing now, just from just the time I have sitting around at home, but definitely hitting the long tones and the lip slurs.
Truly, every single day, you're going to be tailoring your exercise routine to whatever it is that you're preparing for, right? Ideally, I just look to stay balanced, right? So there are certain elements when it comes to, we'll say, like preparing for an audition or preparing a symphony that's coming up. Obviously, there are going to be small excerpts within those things that will need special attention. I like to call those daily doses. And so in addition to finding a way to stay balanced in the orchestra, whether you're, 1 week you're playing the Shasti 10 and you're really kind of pumping it hard and going home and being like, what the heck do I do now? I'm exhausted. And sometimes the answer honestly is rest. Well, let's be really honest. And it might be something specific as in, where is the air meeting the sound? And that's the only thing I need to make sure is back in order before my next day happens. And there might be some really basic things on those days too, which might be as simple as like putting some ice on your face, truly taking ibuprofen, taking a nap, taking a bath. I know that's all that stuff sounds ridiculous, but you are an athlete and need to treat yourself that way. And so I will always consider where I'm at as to what it is that I'm doing each day. I think it's easy for us to get into these routines where we are practicing what we're good at. So I definitely try to challenge those boundaries as well. Usually finding an etude that I haven't played before. It's overwhelming to say that I'd like to do a new etude every day, but it's more likely that every week that I might find something new to keep it fresh. Figuring out how that can be useful for my week and the stuff that I'm preparing for. So starting my day off with moving air type exercises, moving air into my instrument, finding the point in which I know that that wind and that moving air is going to turn into a beautiful sound, and not blowing past that point and making sure that you actually meet that point. And that's where you're going to have your most beautiful sound. So sound production being probably one of the most important parts of starting your day. What do I sound like in this moment? Okay, cool. Now my sound feels like it's starting to open up, because ideally that's what people are listening to. They're hearing your sound. I would move on to different types of articulation. I personally love to call upon Chris Gecker's articulation exercises, and I like to manipulate them into whatever type of articulation it is that I feel like needs my attention that day. I like to go through patterns of slurred work and then slowly add in different types of diction along that airstream, so that I'm sure that when I'm articulating that there's still air moving. So that is a huge part of my articulation practice. I don't know if I specifically said it. It's the articulation study. I can't remember exactly which one it is, but I know that he has a whole book of articulation. It's like page 1, just to be very clear. And so much like you could probably use a Clark, it's just, sequences of different keys in the same pattern, and using those patterns to add in articulation how you want to, with the slurred version of it being the example set for the rest of the articulation that you add in. And that includes different types of multiple tonguing as well. I then would probably move on to different types of lyrical stuff, check back in with my sound, be sure that my ears are going there, and not still focused on the production of the actual articulation. And then probably expand my register from there lyrically as I can, really listening to, all right, great, from C to C sounds good, but as I get up, my sound gets thinner, or vice versa. Well, now you're working with, I am either blowing past my sound, or I'm not quite meeting the point in which the resistance in the instrument turns into an actual sound. And so that would be a quick overview of what ideally I would do. And to be honest, how it differs, I think is like truly, it's like every single day it's different for me. So I try to look for the most ideal thing each day.
I like to organize my sound every mornings. I don't call warming up. I prefer to call organize my sound. In the afternoons, I really like to play the repertory, all the pieces that I want to play, and I have to play in my concerts. I play in the afternoons. For me, this is my ideal practice. Also, from 6 years ago or 5 years ago, I can play also in the morning the dress rehearsal, for example. You know that for the brass players is very difficult for the lips, for the endurance. And now for me, I now how manage the situation. Okay, I can save some high notes, for example, but I can really play, because I believe that if you do every day all the things very correctly, you will get success with your daily practice.
It does differ from an ideal practice day. I do not have an ideal practice day every day. Right now, I am, let me see, 91, 98. Today is day 99 of committed daily practice. All right. So for me, that's just a matter of practicing my horn every day. Because during this pandemic, man, I went through a period where I got pretty dark. I got kind of depressed, man, and I didn't play for a couple of weeks. And, I've always known this, but it was just reaffirmed that when I practice, I feel better. Mentally, physically, spiritually, in every way, I feel better. So I practice every day. Today's day 99, tomorrow's 100, which was my goal, to make it to 100. So I will make it. But I don't have my ideal practice day every day. I do get in my routine, my basic routine, which sometimes is 15 minutes. Sometimes it's 5 hours. Excuse me, sometimes 5 hours of routine, meaning I came up doing the Bill Adam routine, and blowing the pipe, working on my sound, playing long tones, doing flexibility, tonguing, articulations, fingering exercises, range, focusing on the 5 fundamentals every day. So I get in my 5 fundamental exercises every day, bare minimum. There have been 1 or 2 days in these last 99 days where all I did was actually carusos. I got in. I don't do the 6 magic notes. I do the 6 notes, and then I go down an octave to the low C and go up chromatically to the G. So it's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 notes. So there have been a couple of days where that's all I've done. But my average practice day is I get in the Bill Adam routine, sometimes a shortened version of that. If I'm in the middle, I got a nonprofit organization I run, and I've got my mutes that I'm developing, and I do a lot of different things. I have like 4 jobs. So, sometimes I get stuck somewhere and don't get in the practice that I would normally want to get in. But in terms of my ideal practice day, I would want to get in the full Bill Adam routine, get like 3 or 4 exercises at least in each of the different categories over the period of several hours. It's important for me anyways, to rest as much as I practice, to keep my tops fresh so I don't get tired, because I want to build the muscle. So an ideal day would be that, get all that stuff in and work on some music and record. I try and record a lot, and I'm lucky to have a lot of situations that I need to record for my job. But that would be an ideal day. So my typical day is to at least get in exercises that cover all the 5 fundamentals.
I get this question a lot, actually, how my practice day look, and it's not the same. It's different almost every day. It depends a bit what I'm preparing at the moment, and if I'm on the road, or I actually like my practice to be flexible. I like the idea that nothing is exactly the same. So I try to like also keep it interesting somehow. I don't love to practice. I actually not at all. So I need to, I'm not a big fan. I know I have to. So it's like, yeah. So therefore, I like to change it up a little bit. So of course, my warm up is kind of the same every day. It can be a bit longer, a bit shorter, what I have to, and then the rest of it I try to be a bit spontaneous as well. I mean, except for the things that I really have to learn. Yeah, and it depends if I'm home or in a hotel room or I have to practice, in a concert hall. If I have a concert that day, it's different. Yeah, but I like change. I like that it's different, the variety.
Wow, how about that? First of all, I would like to thank all of my guests. I had a blast speaking with all of you. And as a reminder, this is video 1 in a 15-part series, so make sure that you subscribe so that you don't miss the rest of the videos. Now, I know I really took a lot away from this video, so much insight, knowledge, and I really hope that this inspires you too. My biggest takeaway from hearing all of these answers is that success isn't an accident, it's deliberate. Focusing on fundamentals, consistency, prioritizing practice, finding what works best for you, these are all common threads. Now, in this video, we heard the how and what with regards to practice. But to really understand how these trumpeters were shaped and how they developed their approach, we can take it back even further, which brings me to question number 2. In the next video, I've asked everyone the following question. Who was your most influential teacher and why? Again, I've already heard all of the answers, so I can say you are not going to want to miss this next video. If you enjoyed this video, let me know in the comments below. And while you're at it, why don't you hit that like button and share this video with a friend? That would really mean a lot to me. I want to thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.